Let's go back and spend some more time with our old friend overhead. Thought you knew all there was to it? Well, there's a bit more to discover. First, a little recap. We made a predetermined overhead rate at the beginning of the year by taking the total estimated overhead cost and dividing that by the total estimated allocation base to get a predetermined overhead rate. Then, we used this rate throughout the year as we made our products to apply overhead to our products and include in the total and unit product cost. We used these cost figures to determine cost of goods manufactured and cost of goods sold. When we made our predetermined overhead rate, we did that at the beginning of the year, before we actually made any products or had any bills come in. Because we didn't know what our actual overhead costs would be throughout the year, we used estimated amounts to come up with this rate. We used the predetermined overhead rate all throughout the year as we made products and applied the overhead to them. This rate is based on estimated overhead. However, we had actual overhead throughout the year. Take one item of overhead as a simplified example, the electricity bill. At the beginning of the year, we didn't know how much our total electricity cost would be for the entire year, so we estimated it. Let's assume we estimated our total electric cost for the year would be $57,000. Each month, we get and pay the actual electric bill. At the end of the year, we can calculate the total actual electricity cost. That comes to $61,000 this year. We estimated a total of $57,000, but actually had a cost of $61,000. We were pretty close, but off by $4,000. That means we underestimated the overhead. Why is this important? Well, since we were using estimated data, we used the $57,000 to come up with our predetermined overhead rate. This is what we use to apply overhead to our products all year and include in the cost of our products. Since we underestimated, we didn't apply all of the actual overhead to the products. We knew that could happen since we were using estimated numbers. However, at the end of the year, that means we have some cost left over in the overhead account that didn't get allocated, and we need to do something with that $4,000. Let's look at our overhead account. Each time we make products, we assign overhead to them using that predetermined rate, the one that we use estimated amounts in. When we apply overhead, we decrease overhead with a credit. When we have actual overhead costs incurred, like the electric bill, we would increase the overhead account with a debit. If we estimated the exact amount of actual overhead we have, then the overhead account will be zero at the end of the year. If the estimate is different than the actual, which would be likely, then we would end up with a balance in the overhead account at the end of the year. If we applied more overhead than we actually had, so the estimate was greater than the actual cost, we overapplied, and the overhead account would have an ending credit balance. If we applied less overhead than we actually had, so the estimate was less than the actual cost, we underapplied, and the overhead account would have an ending debit balance. We need to clear out or dispose of any remaining balance in overhead at the end of the year to make our product cost correct. If we underapplied overhead, we didn't put enough cost on the products. We need to add the remaining balance in overhead to our products. If we overapplied overhead, we put too much cost on the products. We need to subtract the remaining balance in overhead from our products. So, how do we make this adjustment? You've got two options. One, adjust everything through cost of goods sold. Or, two, divide it amongst work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. We're going to use the cost of goods sold option. We take the balance in the overhead account at the end of the year and adjust cost of goods sold by this amount. If we underapplied and the overhead account has a debit balance, then we will need to add this cost to cost of goods sold. We will debit cost of goods sold and credit overhead. If we overapplied and the overhead account has a credit balance, we will need to subtract this cost from cost of goods sold. We will debit overhead and credit cost of goods sold. Because of this adjustment, you may see cost of goods sold stated on reports and financial statements as unadjusted cost of goods sold before this entry and adjusted cost of goods sold after this entry is made. Now the overhead account has a zero balance, and we're ready to start again next year